Hello and welcome to Builders, the podcast where we talk to the people building the future of tech, business, and everything in between. I'm your host, Lee Haynes, and today's guest is someone right at the center of the European data and AI ecosystem. Goran Cvetanovski is the founder and group CEO at Hyperite and the driving force behind the Data Innovation Summit in Stockholm, one of the Nordics' biggest data analytics and AI gatherings, bringing together 3,500 plus leaders and practitioners. A quick bit of context for listeners. Data Innovation Summit has grown into a multi-stage, multi-format event with 300 plus speakers, multiple stages, and a big focus on applied AI, data platforms, and real-world transformation. And we're at a fascinating moment right now where AI is moving from experimentation into real business impact. And companies are being forced to rethink everything from infrastructure to operating models and leadership. Goran has a front row seat to what's actually changing versus what's just noise. So let's get into it. Goran, a warm welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
Very good. Thank you very much for inviting me, Lee. It's a true pleasure to be on this podcast. We're just looking at some of the past guests here, and it's truly astonishing what you guys are building with the podcast and with the community around it. So kudos to you guys.
Thanks so much, and thanks again for joining us. Let's just start really quickly with a little bit about yourself, just your background for those listening in.
So, well, the background is very simple. So basically, I'm in a background, I'm a chemical engineer, but the last 20 years since I moved to Sweden, I have been focusing on executing events. I'm an entrepreneur. I do quite a lot of things. But for the past 10 years, my focus has been on data analytics and AI. So through Agorify, we'll help mid-sized and large enterprises accelerate their data and AI transformation. We do this by organizing events. Either they are small ones, like, for example, master classes, workshops, or large-scale events like Data Innovation Summit. And we have been successful in geo-cloning this, so we are now operating over 4 continents with offices in Europe, Middle East, and Asia-Pacific, and Australia and New Zealand, which is completely new for us.
Fantastic. And I believe you've described this year as like a true transformation year, right? What do you kind of mean by that? What kind of feels different, would you say, compared to the last couple of years when it comes to AI and specifically data, of course?
It's a great question, actually. What feels different? I think the one thing that is very clear is that AI is no longer being treated as a side experiment, but a little bit more as an innovation or innovation lab. But the conversations is actually moving or has moved actually from what AI can do to where exactly does this create value, what is the infrastructure do we need, and then finally who is accountable for the results, right? So just this discussion shows that there is like a very different maturity level, right? The last couple of years we have been focusing quite a lot on curiosity and pilots and proof of concepts, and but this year for me feels operational. You can see that enterprises are rewiring around AI. Agentic systems are moving closer to production. We have leadership teams that are being forced to make different decisions, especially when it comes to data foundation. And that is very, very, very important to mention. So the leadership is making decision within data foundation, operating model, ROI, risks, and etc. When this happens, that means that AI is already being widespread, and now the conversation is moving to operational mode. I was doing analysis actually of the sessions that we have received this year for Data Innovation Summit. And it probably feels like a rabbit hole, question one to go into it. But the indications that we got from the analysis is that most of the companies right now, they are finding themselves in the late adoption, early industrialization period. What this means that there is basically the experimentation is gone, and now we are moving into pilot data platform modernization, data quality observability, AI governance and risk. We have ML ops, LLM ops, data ops. We can see that data is prominent around different workflows. We have federated data management practices. So the data and AI is pushed towards the edges, right? And then that is around 60 to 65% of all the presentations. Around 2025 are super advanced, which are looking at agentic AI, autonomous systems, synthetic data, multimodal generative AI architectures, and then real-time decisioning and etc. So, and then you have foundational layer, which is actually the laggers. It's around 10 to 15% of the presentation are there. And those conversations are basically on data governance basics, not federated data management, data governance, rather than the basics, data literacy, BI modernization, breaking silos between organizations, etc. So you can see that there is a very, very big shift in the maturity, and that is because we have also had this past 10 years in the pleasure actually of taking these AI tools and experimenting with them, but now it's actually time to show the money.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Like we can safely say we're officially past that kind of experimentation phase, right? And everything's a lot more operational. And there is that kind of narrative emerging that companies are restructuring, right? Even changing roles, cutting roles, whatever it might be, while doubling down on AI. How do you kind of interpret that shift? Is it mostly driven by like efficiency pressure, or are organizations genuinely like redesigning how work actually gets done?
All right. I see it actually as a mix of a couple of things. The first is, of course, productivity is one of them. We can see basically productivity expectations are rising because of the AI makes certain types of work faster, right? Second, the macro pressure is forcing all of these companies basically to be much more leaner and more selective, and basically just make sure that what they do really matters. And the third one is the leadership team are basically relocating capital from headcount growth to a little bit more technology capacity, especially when it comes to AI, software, data platforms, and automation, right? So it's too simplistic for us to say that AI is replacing people, because it doesn't, right? It's just right now it's compressing everything towards delivery. I believe that this year is actually focused on fast delivery. I just posted about this morning as well. So delivery, scale, and value. I did also a little bit of analysis of that on the market, and I thought that I will see a very big dip in a software engineering replacements of hiring and etc. But you can see that it's equalized. But there is a different way or there is a different or an interesting actually insight in that, and that is actually that you can see that companies are hiring, enterprises are hiring less junior titles, but they are focusing more on the senior titles.
Right.
So this model that we had is a pyramid where you have like a major, let's say, a very big volume of juniors run by seniors. It's gone, and it's moving towards more like a diamond shape, where we have basically very lean and compound type of teams that are focusing on delivery. Now you can deliver with senior managers that understand basically a code and understand basically how to do systems and etc. You can do much more things effectively, thanks to, of course, Claude and all of these AI tools that we have. But for that, you need seniority. So what we see on the market is actually really realistic towards this optimization, operationalization of AI and etc. And I think it's going to hold for some time. But there is a question though. So what will happen if this continue with the juniors? Software engineers, because they need to be trained to become senior somewhere. And that is where the startup actually scene comes in play, where you can see right now we have Silicon Valhalla here, right, in Sweden, and all of these other things. So we need to utilize these juniors as well that have like a great, what is called skill set and etc. But we can see that clearly that enterprises are optimizing towards senior leadership and diamond and hourglass type of strategy and structure.
Yeah, a really, really good point. I think we're, we're keeping on top of those things as well, and I think it's really interesting to see where things are going. If you're assuming on this kind of agentic coding, where the agents are maybe performing large chunk of the written code, right? But the other skill set then of the senior engineers is what's kind of required today in order to run those agents, right? They're looking at these
Right.
maybe different upper levels of coding where they're looking at the business context and
Yes.
stuff like this, right?
What was the latest? 30% of all new content since December is actually written by AI.
Yeah, something like that. And then obviously you listen to a lot of these kind of pioneers or kind of leading, lights in the field, and they're writing. I think they're writing zero code themselves. So I mean,
Well,
there's a direction in which this is going, right? That's quite clear.
Right. But it's also very interesting. It's very interesting. It's natural that you hire senior people to review code, right? Because that is their job. But in the same time, it's like we are coming back to the first question when I said, like, who is accountable?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So you cannot make risks, like just putting a lot of juniors coding in, etc. Because that is also, quite a lot of the risk management is too high.
Yep. And do you think we're like entering a world where, say, data and AI capabilities are treated almost like national or kind of these corporate assets that need to be protected?
Oh yeah. We had a discussion about this, and I think you can see it. This is already in motion, and you can see it everywhere. I mean, sovereignty and resilience are the number one topics today. I was just a couple of weeks ago back on a GTC in San Jose, the NVIDIA big conference, and you can see that the whole basically notion about where we are right now is moving to AI factories. But these AI factories then become like, strategically important for organizations. And we can divide this in two parts where we are seeing actually that this is the reality. The first time we are seeing actually the governments and enterprises talk about sovereign AI. They're talking about domestic infrastructure. They're talking about control access to compute. We have European AI clusters right now, protected model environments. We have like strategic data assets, all of this discussion within the government level right now. So this language actually is changing everything. So AI is not longer being seen as a software capability, but more as a strategic capacity for countries and regions to compete on a global level. In the retrospective today, or basically in parallel to that, you have for the corporation, the equivalent of this will be proprietary data, would be the domain knowledge, would be the fine-tuned models, it will be the agentic models that they are putting in place, the workflow intelligence, and etc. I don't think that we are still talking enough about workflow intelligence, which is actually the backbone of every agent. But I think that is going to be a full, let's say, IP portfolio at some point of time for organization. It will be protected dearly. So I think that whoever controls these layers that I just mentioned, either that is on a corporate or a governmental level, and whoever controls the margin and the speed and defensibility, because it's a lot of what is called risks as well. Those are the ones that will be prevailing and winning in the long term.
And on the company level, do you see companies building their own AI capabilities or renting them from bigger providers, or kind of how is that balance evolving?
Yeah, I think that the answer there is to. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. The interesting fact from GTC was this 5-layer cake, which is basically the 5 layers of AI, starting from energy to infrastructure to chips and basically applications and everything else that is needed. Companies definitely, I think, will own some kind of a factories in the future. But if they don't, they need to borrow. Right now, this is not even an option, because even the highest and the biggest companies in the world, we have a difficulty of acquiring chips, right? Because we are at that point of time. There is no capacity on the market right now. And even if they do, it's basically long term periods and etc. If you Google actually, so I don't know if this is official thing or not, but if you go through all of this generative AI or Google online, you will find that in the Nordics now we have around 57 neo clusters and data centers just basically that came up in the last couple of years. And I was with some of those some of the CEOs in Silicon Valley now when we were visiting there, and most of them, they have already rented out the entire capacity even before it's built. People are queuing actually for the next 1 or 2, 3 years to get access to this capacity. So, as Jensen said, there is no CEO or manager in the world that will not know the cost of a token. And you have only two ways how to acquire those AI, let's say, capabilities, and that is by building or hiring. And right now, hiring is the right one, but then where? So the Swedish and the Nordic, I think that they will basically search for Nordic first, and then European, and then it is what it is.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting also to think of like data and AI within companies being something as those companies kind of treat as, property or, their own kind of IP. Like, what do you think this kind of means in terms of a shift for how those businesses operate? Does it change how they think about, for example, vendors or partnerships or who gets access internally?
Well, I think that basically most of the companies will definitely continue renting foundational capabilities from hyperscalers because one, we don't have any options. The second is actually the speed of the value that we need to deliver is in question. So, and to be honest, we don't even have any type of European clouds and etc. to replace them. But that is not the the excuse for it. I think that more companies will start thinking about different layers of what they're going to use. I think that we are going back to the hybrid type of a infrastructure where some of the things you will do on-prem or basically through AI factories, data centers, whatever you want to call them, and then some of the things will be optimized for cloud and etc. And you can already see this in finance, in telecoms, in retails, and different other companies. But the interesting fact is actually like if the AI model and the agentic model that you are building, it's truly important for your organization. Let's say that a company X, which is in a pharmaceutical company, is developing drug, which is potentially going to be the ultimate on the market and potentially bring billions of dollars. Why would you put that type of infrastructure and R&D on a cloud where if you don't know if this is secure or not? That is the question, because right now we are actually building AI models on hyperscalers and clouds and everything else. But we are very early in the AI adoption. And now when we are starting maturing, we are starting asking different questions. And those questions not always will be in favor in speed, rather than we will see a balance between a speed and security and a long-term value in any shape or form. And that can be either from an IP perspective or from knowledge-based, etc. So it's a little bit of a political question, a political answer that I'm giving to you, but I think that hybrid is the way to go, and we can already see it on Data Innovation Summit and most of the conferences that we do.
And I think, it's interesting. It is a political topic as well, right? Let's face it. But when it comes to companies struggling with data, because let's face it, a lot of companies still struggle with data and kind of how fast they can really move. What do you think is holding a lot of companies back in this regard? Is it the technology, the culture, leadership, or incentives? I know you've spoken a little bit about leadership before, and we'll get more to that. But what would you say is really holding most of them back?
Yesterday, if you asked me this question, I had a perfect question for you and the perfect answer to you. And the answer would be all three, but I would focus on leadership the most. However, I did a little bit, as I said, like I stayed a little bit late until late nights evaluating all the submission forms that we got for the Data Innovation Summit, the ones that we accepted and the ones that we basically had to put for another time, because we are getting a lot of submission for this. And I can actually now for certainty, if I can show you, for example, if I could have shown you the screen, I would, but then I will actually just mention the challenges in real time. How do they look like? The first one is actually from pilot to production. So many companies have like a lot of pilots, but few scaled deployments. I'm looking at the screen here. So the second is the lack of standardization, fragmented ownership in that type of aspect. And this is actually, I think, the central problem of 2026. And this is what the data is also showing it. The second one is data quality and accessibility. We don't talk too much about this because we are focused on the flashy thing about generative AI and agentic AI and workflows and everything else. But if there is no good data, you cannot run anything from it. So we have issues with inconsistent data. We have issues with poor metadata. We have limited discoverability of the data. We have trust issues. And the problem is that AI is just exposing all of this data depth and in a brutal way, right? We usually say, oh, but the AI doesn't work. No, your data doesn't work. Your data quality and practices and strategy doesn't work. That is the main point of it. So that's why also leadership needs to basically put a little bit more emphasis on their data management practices, because also what we discussed before, the intellectual property and etc. will be tied with the data that you have, because you know your customers provide you with the data that you need to develop your products and etc. And if you don't take care of that, it doesn't matter what you do in any case. The third one was organizational misalignment. So you see basically that is you can see it indirectly in many sessions. So you have business versus tech disconnect. Then you have tech. We are talking about business versus IT, IT versus AI, AI versus business. So it's not even the gap longer two partial, it's three partial, right? And all of this is creating quite a lot of confusement in the market. Then you have compliance and innovation tension. So basically, from one side, we want to have a value delivery and speed with the speed of light, but from the other side, we have basically brick. Right, we have like compliance, regulation, AI Act, and etc. And the companies that will manage to work with the brake and the what is called the pedal, the gas pedal, or whatever you want to call it, in the same way internally in the company, taking the legal as a part of the innovation engine, those are the ones that will prevail. And then we have lack of ownership. Again, who is responsible for AI in the company? Why it should be the chief AI officers? They should be responsible for the technical. They should be responsible for the technical innovation about the model, about the data, about the structure, about the delivery, and etc. They cannot be responsible for the output or the business value of it. The leadership needs to take ownership of that, or the business side needs to take ownership of that. So this is not a tech problem. We can see it. AI is not a tech problem. This is actually an operational or operative model problem, right? Companies needs to understand how they will transform their businesses with this technology. Now, how this technology will transform their business. So they need to work along in parallel, not basically just spearheading everything. And I think this has been a challenge for the past 10 years. The innovation finger for business and tech innovation for the past 10 years has been pointed to the technical people. Deliver a sales agent that will increase our sales for 3%. How?
Yeah.
When I have never worked in it. And shortly, the last three ones, so I will not spend so much time of that. One is governance versus speed. We can see a lot of conversation about that, especially in a banking, telecom, and a public sector. Then you have skills and leadership gap. Needs of AI literacy, need for new leadership models, cross-functional teams. We are not talking about cross-collaboration between industries at all, which I think is the biggest problem for us in the Nordics and in Sweden, because we organize events, people do not know each other. And they're all CIOs, chief AI officers, and etc. We need to collaborate. And the last one is infrastructure and cost. So we have compute costs, we have challenges with vendor lock-ins, architecture decisions. So it was not that simple as I thought it was yesterday, because this perspective of what the sessions are actually showing, it's a little bit more larger than the people, leadership, and technology part. It's actually a mixture of both. I'm this year for me, everything is about leadership, as this is a transformation year. But
Yeah.
here it is.
Yeah. And on the point of leadership, then, I mean, when it comes to not just what's being built with AI, but rather like driving AI adoption within the organization, like how important do you think it is to balance this kind of top-down strategy with let's say a worker first or like bottom-up approach, right? When we're trying to kind of drive an AI adoption throughout the organization.
I think that we are done with the bottom up. It's not if you're still doing bottom up, it's you're done. You're doomed. It's we are at that point of time when if the organization doesn't take this serious, they don't even try to do AI.
Yeah.
What is the point of actually you? I mean, everything is moving so quickly, right? We were talking about generative AI, then agent, then suddenly OpenClaw comes in,
Exactly.
and then it changes everything.
Yeah, indeed. But what then is required of a strong leader in this context, in today's context?
What is required from a strong leader? The strong leader, first of all, I think that all leaders, first of all, they need to be they need to have technical literacy. They need to understand at least the basics of what this is, what are the limitations of it.
Yep.
They should be, and they should not take this from any consultant. They should go on the floor, speak with the people that are actually doing this technology for them, and ask them to give them literacy, what is called courses and etc. Because that is the only way how they can learn it and etc. I'm not saying that it should be technical enough, although you can see more CXO type of functions. They already in their requirements they have some kind of a proficiency with AI, enterprise AI, or some kind of a coding, vibing, or whatever is going to be. So I think it's very important. So one, they need to be technical. The second, they need to be long term, because I see a symptom that many organizations are trying to get just let's use AI, but they don't understand why. It's almost like some kind of a identity crisis. Suddenly we need to change things. We need to change what our company does just because of AI. So we used to be a fashion company. Now we're going to be the first. We're going to revolutionize fashion because we're going to put some kind of AI model and etc. Look, if you're if people are going to your business, to let's say that is a restaurant to eat food. No matter if you have robots serving the food, that is only experience, right? People are still coming there to eat food. If the food is rubbish, people will not come. So we don't need to reinvent our businesses. We just, as I mentioned, our business needs to go in parallel with these technologies, because the technologies are changing. And the shifts of changing are actually getting oscillated more and more and more and more. So I think this one is actually, they need to be, we are looking for strong, informed, cross-functional leadership. We are looking for people that are actually both knowledgeable in technology, but also legal aspects and etc. So I think everything is changing. It's very hard to point it out, but I'm trying very hard to narrow it down to three things. But I think it's very hard. But one thing, if you're not technical, I don't think that is going to be good.
Yeah, no, I think I can agree that kind of technical fluency is all important. And I also think on your point, a lot of organizations kind of fall into a trap, right, where they kind of reinvent exactly what they are delivering as opposed to how it's delivered, essentially. But I want to talk a little bit about the summit and what that kind of reveals about the industry at the moment, because you're, like I said before, you're organizing one of the biggest data and AI events in Europe. What are you mentioned some of the themes you're seeing from the applications that you've been getting in. What themes are new this year, and are there lots that are kind of repeating?
Well, I think I already mentioned some of the things that are happening. I think there's a lot about operationalizing AI. We can see a lot of focus on what is called. Let me back down a little bit. So it's data innovation is basically, if you see data innovation is large, but it's very simplistic in the way, because it's built to provide like an insight of how to turn data into value. So we have everything from collection, storage, managing, distributing data across the edges, then basically the application layers. Once you have the data, what kind of a intelligent layer you can do, or intelligent product you can do. So everything from business intelligence, decision intelligence, what is called like business analytics, data analytics type of capabilities, visualization, reporting, everything else. And then you go into the little bit more of the AI zone, where you have everything from predictive, prescriptive models to generative AI models, agentic AI. You have like a synthetic data and all these other things. What we can see clearly that actually most of the new topics is around decentralized data and value creation. It's about like, okay, when we have these agents, how do we develop, deploy, and scale this into production? How do we govern systems into an enterprise setting? How do we tie this with how do we tie this with the overall goal of the organization or business, basically goals and etc. And how do we adopt this technology? How do we make them more people to use it, and etc. etc. Of course, we have also new parts which are on data and AI infrastructure and security, which is going into these data centers. AI compute, should we hire? Should we build it? How do we actually? So there is the whole discussion is about operationalization and transformation in this area. I would like to point on the things that we are not hearing enough about, which I think that are upcoming, and that is actually one is that the clear business ownership of AI. I think that until Data Innovation Summit and events like this are starting to be visited by business functions and CXOs like CFOs and CEOs and product owners and etc. That's why we added a new day to Data Innovation Summit. These events will still be technical innovation type of events, but the hardest point is how do you turn that into value? And for this, we need to have the 95% of the rest of the organization, and that is the business. The second, we are not talking too much about the AI economics. We are still focusing on the like model and the value, but we are not talking about the cost versus value. We are not talking about the token economics, which Jensen was talking about this year. We are not talking about ROI frameworks, so basically workflows and strategies and organization that are clearly showing this is how we're going to put it into practice and get ROI. We are not talking enough about operational model transformation. We are talking about agents, but we are not talking about operating model transformation in terms of organizational structural change, decision-making changes, how teams should be redesigned, and finally competitive advantage and strategy. But we have been thinking about this. So we are setting up a new event that is going to be a complementary to the Data Innovation Summit called Vision 2040. This is the first time that actually goes out. So you have the scoop there, which is coming up in Stockholm, which is going to focus a little bit more on the business side as well. So yeah, that is in total what it is at this point of time.
Yeah,
we're expecting a great event. A lot of great presenters are coming across the world, and
fantastic.
It's going to be awesome.
Super nice. I think it's great that you also mentioned those things that you're not seeing as well, and it's very interesting that you mentioned the kind of cost side of things, right? Because I think that's a point that a lot of companies are going to feel constrained by, right? Token consumption and whatnot. But when you're talking to companies at the event or the different events that you're hosting, also the individuals, what are they saying about things right now, or about hiring right now? If they're, is their biggest pain finding skills? Do they talk about the skill sets that they need now, and how do they evaluate those skills? I'm just interested to hear how they talk about it.
Right. I think we touched upon a bit on this earlier. So at some point of time, I was a little bit worried because there was a lot of basically turbulence on the market. There was a lot of laying off and etc. and companies actually taking the restructuring too far. So there is a lot of capable people on the street. But then when you look at if you go to LinkedIn and you go to any of the companies that are working with that, the hiring has not stopped. It's actually intensified. As I mentioned before, we are compressing right now, and we are aligning the organization. You can see a clear alignment of the organizations towards AI operationalization. So when you do that, you're looking for a little bit more senior leadership or senior people that will take you that step forward, so to say. You just mentioned cost, right? When you optimize costs, you want to get the best thing for the buck that you're investing. So for example, if I need to hire 15 juniors and I get basically one senior and one AI agent to do the job, then probably I will optimize for that. So I think that we are looking at quite a lot of compression and reorganization towards AI deliverability, towards speed, towards those things. So I don't think that I think that it's a very interesting time to live, especially in Stockholm and in the Nordics and etc., because we have this fun and very exciting polarity between enterprise optimization and a startup like rapper type of hype, a lot of companies building and etc. Right? So you can see that this is actually in some kind of a play. These are two different things that are not completely merging. It's almost like a oil and water. But I think that the market, if you look at the boat, is in a pretty much good equilibrium. One is contributing with a lot of experience and a juniors becoming seniors and exploring business models, and the other ones are actually optimizing a little bit more about how do they deliver value in a very structured, organized way in a macroeconomics that is not as it was, that is a little bit more less globalized than before, that is not so easy to break through. So you have the both actually things. So I don't think that the hiring actually is the recruitment has stalled rather than it's increased. And for all of the doomers that are saying that AI will take our jobs and etc. I think that we are very early in the stage where AI actually is providing the value that we want, and I think that is going to contribute with a lot more work than we wanted that we had before. However, the trade-off is that we will need to be more. We need to deliver more. Right? It's
That's the
expected right now
expectation,
from
right?
a software engineer, senior software engineer, to basically be 55%. I think I read some kind of a statistic, 55% more deliver 55% more.
Output, yeah.
Output, right? Because you have all of these agents and etc. So we should stop talking about like AI is going to replace people. AI is just going to enable people and organizations to optimize their work and provide more value for the buck. So the cost versus value, I think, is going to be a very large discussion, and the workforce is part of it, right?
Completely agree. I think, it kind of just moves the goalposts, the expectations in terms of what's not so much what's being delivered, but how much is being delivered in that same time, right? And I think what it ultimately means is that the people's roles, right? The software engineer's role, for example, just changes. They're leveraging a different area of their skill set essentially in what they do.
But it's a natural way, Lee, right? It has been there for ages. People forgot that basically we didn't have data scientists in the Nordics. It was 952 of them on LinkedIn when I started Data Innovation Summit. We have over 220,000 in the Nordics right now. These are not coming from anywhere, etc. It was a shift of moment because business intelligence, you would find business intelligence warehousing people and etc. all over the place. And then when data science became very attractive, people started taking courses and moving towards there. So the job role changed. And then they became machine learning, and the machine learning people, they started being AI engineers and etc. So every job function is actually moving, especially in software engineering, towards the new technology, towards what is new, what is the hot on the market right now. I think that the languages are changing as well, right? The programming languages, so you can see a shift in that as well. So we are thinking, I think that sometimes we are thinking too much that what we are experiencing is a long-term commitment. That is both for us and companies as well. So let me do something and this will last basically for the next 10, 15 years. That age is over, right? The oscillation shifts or the change shifts, they are getting more and more and more shorter. So that means that we need to build our companies to be resilient, to be adaptive, to be intelligent enough. And so does the workforce. It's going to be expected from every person in the future to be what is called acquainted with change, rapid
Yep.
change all the time,
Yep.
because that is where the world is living. So we
Yep.
need to stop thinking that jobs will change. Of course they will change, and they will change in my work life maybe 100 or 50 times. I don't know, depending.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And as we start to wrap up a little bit here, if we're to kind of fast forward a couple of years, what do you think will separate the companies that are succeeding in this transition or adoption from those that did not succeed?
That one is actually the easiest of all the questions that you ask. I think that it's going to be the companies, one, that invest in people. Because this is, as we said, this is an operating model problem. It's not a technological problem. I think that most of the companies needs to transform, and the companies that will transform the fastest and enabling their organizations, A, with the literacy about what data and AI is, two, with this data and AI products, so they can be able to innovate and to experiment from a business side. The ones that are bringing the AI teams and the business team closer together, and the ones that they have a leadership that is actually living in the future, making decision for the future today, based on how this technology will not change their business but enable their business to be better, more competitive, and etc. Those are the one that will win the most. So top till bottom approach, then basically closing the gaps and investing in people and technology. Those are the people that will actually win the most, and you can already see it. Come to Data Innovation Summit and you can listen to all the presentation. You will tell me immediately, well, these people got it, because you can see it immediately, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
And
it's a very, very interesting thing, because we haven't even started talking about shadow AI, right? Many organizations are afraid to implement AI, but in the same time, their employees are going to ChatGPT and everything
yeah.
else, and they're sending like memos: "Do not do this, do not do that." You cannot change this, because the cat is out of the
Yeah,
bag.
yeah,
There is
absolutely.
no coming back. Everybody wants to be more effective. Everybody wants to do things in a different way. Intelligence is optimized and it's automized. Now we need to find a way how to do different things.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really, really good point. But a last one from me. What's one belief about AI that you think most leaders or executives will change their mind about in the next year to 2 years?
What they will change? Well, that is a very interesting question. Well, it's very hard to generalize this, because I met some incredible people now in this journey in San Diego that were CEOs of big companies. And I was amazed how much forward thinking they were and how much technical they were. And although sometimes I'm very pessimistic towards that leadership context, because I can see it clearly that the middle layer is ready, but and the tech teams are ready, but the business is not what is called moving forward because of XYZ, because of the bottom to top approach between not alignments and everything else. So it's very hard to generalize, but I think that what is the most important thing, and I think what Jensen said, is that one, we will see a dramatic competition and result of that competition from this algorithmic type of operating models. What I mean by that is that we will see some organizations that are optimizing all of their workflows and in all of their functions with AI. And I think that it will be a clear sign that these organizations are going to be they're going to leap forward dramatically. And that will make a lot of CEOs think like, oh, wait, now it's time. I think that agentic AI will change a lot of things. I think that marketing will change.
Yeah.
We are still not talking about agent to agent. We are still talking about business to business, business to consumers type of a business. We are not talking about A to B, A to C, A to A, which is going to change protocols. It's going to change way how we pay things, how we order things, and etc. Right. The future of businesses is to repeat myself, like it's adoptive and intelligent. You will have refrigerators ordering food without basically you checking what it is there. Milk is out of stock, it's immediately. So if you start thinking what is the world in 2024, that vision is already here. Somebody in Silicon Valley is doing this for you. So we can be disrupted very easy. So within 2 years, I don't think that many things will change, but those that will actually see the future as vivid as some of the ones that I have met, I think that they're going to be winners. AI is out of the bag. There is no coming back. And if you don't optimize for that future, everything, workforce, operations, marketing, supply chain, finance, everything, if you don't think like that, I think that you're already doomed.
Yep.
So it's a little bit of a doomer end, but I think it's also
I think it's
yeah.
it's a really interesting point. I think, like you
Yes.
said, the cat's out of the bag. I mean, it's companies have to adapt or get left behind. It's
Yes.
as simple as that. But yes, Goran, this has been a really, really interesting conversation. I think, a reminder of where we are with AI and data today. I think it's clear we've been moving into this new kind of operational phase, right? And I think, it just leaves me to say a massive thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation. This week has been truly fun.
And for those listening, if you want to stay at the forefront of the shifts that we've been talking about here, the Data Innovation Summit in Stockholm is definitely one to watch, attend if you can, especially given the scale and the breadth of the practitioners and the speakers that it's attracting. So, Goran, thanks once again, and thanks for everyone listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Builders. Until then, keep building and see you soon.